Bienvenue à Paris, everyone. It is Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today, we're going to dive into the interesting subject which pertains to, us being here in Paris, which is what are the best languages that you should learn, or the most useful languages that you should learn for business and as a secondary benefit for travel, but specifically looking for the best languages today for business. So we're going to dive into that subject, and at the end, stick around because I'm going to share with you a powerful tip that I've learned kind of data-backed and from the research about how to really increase the speed at which you learn languages. So that'll be really helpful to you. Before we do that, if you have not done so already, please click the subscribe button. It really helps us. Appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell. Throughout the video, if it turns out you like it, please click the like button. If, at the end you like it, then click the like button. If you have questions or comments, please comment. We enjoy when you share with us your ideas. If there's any of these subjects, we talk about international tax planning, asset protection, where to form companies, how to set up your business in multiple countries, how to do business in multiple countries, how to invest in multiple countries, how to get citizenships or residencies abroad if you want to increase your freedom, etc., then please reach out to us. You can book a call with me, clarity.fm/Michael Rosmer. There's a link below. Or on our website, you can visit offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. All right, let's dive into it. Okay, so I'm going to cover here, hopefully from the perspective of specifically like what is going to optimize your opportunities, which may be a little bit of a different angle from what some people would come at it as, because I'm sure there's a lot of kind of less business-focused looks at language, okay? Now, the first three, I suspect, are probably going to be fairly apparent, but the last two might be a little bit more surprising, so you can stick around to hear them, and I'll kind of go through why it is that they are especially interesting. So let's start with number one, which should be pretty apparent, is English, right? The number one language to have is English, and I was fortunate to be born in an English-speaking country, so it kind of came naturally as part of my upbringing, right? But I often tell people, especially as I visit places in Eastern Europe, as I visit parts of Asia, to some extent Latin America, I'm like, look, if you want to give yourself many more opportunities, learning English is just so powerful. If you just kind of imagine, I remember being in Egypt and thinking like, if you're in Egypt and you speak English, you can sell your services to a global market online. If you can't do that, it's pretty hard, right? So the size of the market that you're able to deal with goes down a lot. The opportunities available, then the things that you can learn. There's just so much educational content out there for people who are speaking English that just as a bare basic, if you're watching this channel, you probably speak English because I'm speaking English. But if you don't, or if your skills are not so great, like I would really recommend putting in that extra effort. I hire people all the time in countries where the English is so-so, and the fact that they have English, that means they can work with us, period. But just that other little bit, the degree of being able to do professionally written English so that emails don't have kind of common mistakes can be a big deal. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, you might say is a little bit of a toss-up, but I'm going to say is Mandarin Chinese, okay? Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, there was Mandarin and Cantonese were the kind of two primary forms of Chinese. Cantonese is basically restricted today to Hong Kong. Mandarin has been imposed by the government pretty much across the country. And why do I say that's the number two language? Well, if you just think about the future of the world, okay, it is inevitable that over time the Chinese market, the Chinese economy, etc., will overcome the US economy. And as that happens, Chinese becomes an increasingly relevant language, both in terms of being able to deal with other companies for the purpose of getting supplies, in terms of being able to find buyers, in terms of being able to cultivate and access innovation. And frankly, there is, if you've ever done business with Chinese people, like in China, what you're going to find is actually they really respect the foreigner, say the white person or whatever you want to call it, who speaks Chinese and understands Chinese customs. So it gives you quite a competitive advantage. Like your value within a business transaction goes up quite a bit. On top of that, listen, where do you want to be? Do you want to be able to take advantage of this rapidly growing economy, or do you want to not be able to take advantage of that? Like, this is just, it's the future, right? And so an investment in the future is pretty much always a good investment. So it's something that I would highly recommend. The third language that is arguably the most beneficial for business, and some people might ask, why this one wasn't number two, and certainly this one is better for travel than Chinese, but for business, I would say it's less good, and that is Spanish. Okay, so obviously, how much of the world speaks Spanish? Tremendous amount, right? You have basically from Mexico down to the tip of Argentina, Chile, with the exception of, with Brazil, right, which speaks Portuguese. So you get a tremendous area, plus you get Spain, right? So this is a pretty wholesome, pretty huge area, and you get a bunch of different advantages. First of all, like, frankly, you just get to travel. Now, I was fortunate again that I lived 3 winters in Costa Rica, just Spanish-speaking country, and so I was exposed to that side of things. Well, listen, many times, again, in 2 regards. One is maybe you want to hire some people, and you have access to a great market of people in the Latin American countries, right? Maybe that's one thing. Or the second is maybe you want to expand and market your products. If I spoke fluent Spanish, unfortunately I don't, but the ability to go and produce the exact same content that I do in the Spanish language on top of English would expose me to a whole other market that is not being competed for nearly as aggressively. Okay, so big opportunities if you can tap into this other market through these other languages. Now, you might ask, okay, well, why is Chinese better than this? I would say a couple different reasons. One, it's a less fractured marketplace, right? So if you try to enter the Latin American space, although you have a large number of Spanish speakers, they're there's a lot of different countries in there, right? And each country has their own rules, they have their own infrastructure, they have their own logistics to deal with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so just because you can sell into, say, Mexico does not necessarily mean you can sell into Argentina, okay? So there's something to be said for that as a disadvantage. The other part is there's frankly less people in all of the Spanish-speaking world than in China, and the GDP of the collective area is less than China. So, and it's growing slower. So all that combination of factors to me means that from a business standpoint, it's a pretty obvious move to look at Spanish. So we've covered the first 3, which I think are the most obvious ones, right? If you were to ask somebody what are the 3 most important languages, you would learn probably English, Mandarin, and Spanish. What's number 4, right? What is number 4? This is an interesting question. I was, again, kind of fortunate. I grew up in Canada, and in Canada, I went for the first 7 years into French immersion school, so I learned French, and that kind of gave me a taste for another language. And I love French. I'm here in Paris today. It's wonderful, but it wouldn't be that. So this next one is one that maybe people don't think about so much, but from an opportunities standpoint is huge, and that's Russian, okay? So why do we say that Russian is such a big deal? Certainly, obviously, okay, you've got like 120 million people in Russia, but it's a relatively poor country, right? GDP per capita is fairly low. It's fairly difficult to sell into that market. There's certainly a lot of differences in terms of kind of the bureaucracy, the shipping, et cetera, right? And therefore, why would I say that? Well, the reason is really twofold. One is activating labor, okay? There is a tremendous amount of potential, not just in Russia, but kind of the Soviet Union and the Halo countries. So for instance, if you go into Georgia, you'll find that a lot of people speak Russian. If you go into Kazakhstan, Russia is far more prevalent than English or Mandarin or Spanish or any of these things. Like, Russia's a big language. It allows you to access, to a greater extent, Moldova, to a greater extent, Romania, to a greater extent, Belarus, and so on and so forth, right? So you're not just getting Russia, you're getting a lot of these surrounding countries, Ukraine, right? These are places where you have a lot of really smart, hardworking, incredibly capable people. And a lot of those people do speak English or some other language, but the truth is that by being able to speak Russian, you get to access a subset of the population that foreign companies and individuals who don't speak the language don't get to access. So let's talk about, say, developer or designer talent, right? One of the best designers that I've ever met in my life is Polish, right? His English is not very good. He, doesn't like to talk to me over the phone. He would rather do it by email. Well, if you just think, the ability to get on a call with him and communicate with him in Polish is an advantage. Now, multiply that out tremendously by looking at someplace like Ukraine or Russia itself, right? How many people are there? I mean, Ukraine has, I think it's like around 50 million people. Russia itself has like 120 million people, and so on and so forth, right? So you get this massive increase in the number of workers you can get. And here's the thing. If you go to Ukraine and you're looking for, say, a developer who speaks English, you're going to pay a higher rate. But if you speak Russian and they speak Russian, then you can pay a lower rate. And so you get this competitive advantage that, multiplied out across a lot of people, is potentially enormous, right? Potentially gives you a great thing. The second reason that this is really important is these are rapidly advancing economies, okay? Like, there's a lot of growth going on, both in Eastern Europe, where Russian, obviously you had for many decades, the Soviet influence, and therefore Russian is fairly widely spoken, but also in Central Asia, right? Kazakhstan, for instance. Like, these are places where there's a lot of advancement, there's a lot of opportunity, they're very up and coming, other people haven't really explored them. So if you can go ahead and be in those places, you're going to get an edge over somebody else who can't. So these are all reasons why I think Russian is good. Not to mention, I mean, you get into the culture, it's great to know that, and just simply learning Cyrillic can be quite good, the alphabet. It's relevant in, for example, Bulgaria and in Serbia. So that's our number 4. What is our number 5, our last place? This one, you might, I would say as you go down the spectrum, it gets harder and harder to figure out, but I would say it's Portuguese, okay? So why Portugal? For the standpoint of like us on this channel, I think there's two reasons. If you're watching this, you're probably, some sort of a digital nomad. Maybe you're interested in residency programs. Maybe you're interested in citizenships. You're probably interested in some sort of online business, etc. So what do you get when you get Portugal? Well, first of all, of course, you get Brazil, which is a huge country, about 200 million people. Plus, you get Portugal itself, ironically much smaller than Brazil. So that in itself is pretty useful, right? You can say, okay, well, I have the ability to access a different market in the Portuguese market, and I can access another market in the Brazilian market, which is quite large. And I can, of course, hire people there. There's actually great quality people that you can get in Portugal for relatively inexpensive. You can do something similar in Brazil. Now, Brazil itself, as a place to sell into, is quite a difficult market to go into. And what that means is there's a lot of natural barriers that have kept some competitors out, and so it gives you a lot of opportunities by being able to go in there. So this is very, very useful, okay? And you can do that to a much greater extent if you have Portuguese, because of the fact that English is not nearly so widely spoken in some of these countries where they have a large internal market, meaning they don't really need to engage. So if you were to compare to, again, France, I'm here. But the reality is French is a wonderful language, but a lot of people in France speak English. You're going to get a lot less percentage of the population that speaks English in Brazil, okay? So you get that advantage, which is great. The other thing that I think is worth noting is Portugal has a really great residency program leading to citizenship. Now, the typical ways that you would set up and maintain this residency will generally involve, when you want to become a citizen, having to pass a language test, okay? If that's the case, if you already speak the language, you're kind of getting a bonus here of being able to get into a really good passport, like it's an EU passport, it's a Schengen passport, it's fantastic, and doing it quite accessibly, so it can be a pretty reasonable path to citizenship, potentially a low tax path to citizenship, and you're getting these other bonuses along the way. So I think that's really the 5th best language to learn from kind of a business opportunity standpoint, as well as kind of rounds off your Latin American experience in terms of the travel and gives you kind of that added edge in Europe. Now, you might say, if you were to add a 6th one, what would that be? Probably, some form of Arabic, right? It's a little bit fractured, again, in that regard, but certainly this is an up-and-coming area. There's lots to explore and some advantages there. To me, it's the fractured nature of it, as well as the fact that you don't have like a really clear market to go into the same way that you have with Portuguese that puts it a little bit behind. So this brings me to the last part, which is, hey, what's the way that you can, work on learning these things if you want to enhance your language skills. This is a tip that I came across not that long ago, but basically what you do is when you're learning it, you watch a TV or movie program in that language. Okay, so let's use an example. Say I wanted to learn Portuguese. So I'm going to watch Portuguese TV or Portuguese film in Portuguese, but with also Portuguese subtitles at the same time. So note, not say Portuguese with English subtitles. That has been proven basically not to have any advantage at all. But Portuguese language auditory, like dubbed, or I guess it doesn't have to be dubbed, but actually the original audio, as well as the written part. Now, why is this? It's because so much of language is actually picked up based on relating a word and a concept. So for instance, I have this glass here, right? If I'm holding this up and I'm saying a glass, you make a connection to it. But if I just tell you a glass, then you're like, huh? You know, there isn't the same mental connection. It's not how our brain form these neural pathways, these neural connections. And so that's really helpful. They've done a lot of research that this is one thing. So something to check out if you're interested in learning new languages. Now, along that line, if you're interested in learning about, moving to other countries, getting residencies, getting second citizenships, setting up international companies, lowering your taxes, banking internationally, setting up payment processing, et cetera, please reach out to us. You can book a call, clarity.fm/Michael Rosmer. There's a link below, or check out our website, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. Click the subscribe button, click the notification bell. If you liked the video, give it a good thumbs up. And if you have comments, I'd love to hear from you on what is it that you think are the great languages that a person could learn. Maybe there's some hidden gem that I have missed in my analysis. And yeah, would love to hear your reasoning. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Would you put one ahead of the other? Let me know. We will see you guys on the next video.